Right now, as you read this sentence in your head, is there a voice saying the words? Most people assume the answer is obviously yes. Of course there's a voice. It's been narrating your entire life. But it isn't obvious, and it isn't universal. Some people report almost no inner voice at all, not a quiet one, as far as they can tell, none. They think in pictures or sensations, or something harder to describe than either. And most had no idea anyone was doing it differently. So here's the honest answer. Inner speech is not universal, and it is not constant in anyone. It runs on a range, from near continuous to apparently absent. But that answer creates a harder problem. When psychologists started measuring this properly, moment by moment, they found something nobody expected. Most people are wrong about their own, including, very probably, you. In January 2020, someone posted online that some people have an internal narrative and some don't. It drew more than 40,000 responses, and they were not calm. Some insisted it was impossible to think without words. Others said they'd reached their 30s without suspecting anyone had a running commentary in their heads. Couples found out they'd been thinking in completely different ways for a decade. Out of that came a statistic you've probably seen, some version of only 30 to 50% of people have an inner monologue. That number is a misreading. It came from real research. But that research was never measuring what percentage of people have an inner voice. For decades, a psychologist at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas named Russell Hurlburt has been doing something unusual. He gives people a beeper. They carry it through an ordinary day. It goes off at random. And the instant it beeps, they write down exactly what was in their experience in the moment just before the sound, not what they usually think, not what kind of thinker they consider themselves to be. What was actually there in that one specific moment. This distinction is the reason that circulating statistic goes wrong. If you ask somebody whether they have an inner monologue, they don't check. They can't. The question is about the past, and the past is gone. So they answer from a theory about the kind of mind they have. The beeper doesn't allow a theory. In one of the foundational studies, Hurlburt's team sampled 30 people, 10 random moments each, 300 snapshots of what was actually in somebody's head. Words showed up in about 1 moment in 4. Pictures showed up slightly more often than words did. But the averages are the least interesting part, because the variation between people was enormous. Some people's sampled moments were full of language. Some had almost none, which is why a single percentage of the population was always the wrong way to answer this question. And then there's what happened when people were trained to observe properly. Hurlburt's participants didn't just get beeped once. They were interviewed in detail afterwards, then sent out to sample again over days, getting better at noticing. And as they got better, their answers changed. People who arrived certain they narrated their entire lives found the narration was patchy. Absent for long stretches they'd assumed were full of words. People certain they never used inner speech found instances they'd never noticed. The confident answer people give about their own mind is not a report, it's a guess. And when researchers compared what people claimed on a questionnaire against what the beeper actually caught, the gap was so wide they called the two irreconcilable. Ask someone how much they talk to themselves inwardly, and they'll tell you more than sampling finds. And here's the part that tends to stay with people. Words are only one of the things that turn up. So do pictures, feelings, plain sensation, attention resting on the texture of something, and one more that most people have no name for. Hurlburt calls it unsymbolized thinking, a thought with definite content. You know exactly what you're thinking, but no words and no image carrying it, nothing symbolic at all, just the thought, complete. It sounds impossible when you describe it, and people report it constantly once they know to look. They just had no name for it, so they never noticed it was happening, which raises the obvious question. If your inner voice is quieter than you assumed, or missing entirely, does it actually matter? For a long time, nobody knew. In 2024, 2 researchers gave it a name, endophasia, and ran the test that had been missing. If there's no voice, does anything actually change? They set 2 tasks. Hold a list of similar-sounding words in your head and spot whether 2 words rhyme. Both are jobs you can do by quietly saying the words to yourself. The people who reported almost no inner voice did worse at both. And then the part that keeps this honest. The same study ran 2 other tasks, and on those, no difference at all. So this isn't a general thinking deficit. It landed precisely where rehearsing words helps and nowhere else, which means your inner voice isn't a soundtrack playing over your thinking. It's a tool doing specific jobs you never noticed it doing. And that would be a clean ending. Except a year later, another researcher published a response saying they'd got ahead of themselves. He accepted the results. The memory and rhyme findings held up. What he rejected was the label, because showing that some people report a very quiet inner voice and score lower on word tasks doesn't prove anyone has none at all. Low is not zero. Others have piled in since, including the argument that the beeper can't be cleanly interpreted in the first place. So the honest state of this is unresolved. Nobody has established that a truly silent mind exists, only that the range runs far wider than anyone assumed. And the reason nobody can settle it is the best part of the whole story. The only instrument for measuring what's inside your head is the person whose head it is. That's not a flaw in the research, it's the subject of it, which leaves one question. Wherever your voice sits on that range, where did you get it? Watch a small child playing alone and you'll hear them narrating out loud. Nobody is listening. Then somewhere around school age, the talking gets quieter, becomes mouthing, and goes silent. Lev Vygotsky argued nearly a century ago that this is where inner speech comes from. It starts as speech aimed outward, at other people, then gets turned inward and compressed. So it isn't something you were born hearing. It's a habit of talking you learned from other people, then pointed at yourself. And because it's compressed, it usually isn't full sentences, often condensed almost to shorthand, one word doing the work of a whole thought. Which may be why people are so bad at reporting it. You're not listening for a fragment. You're listening for a narrator. So, back to where we started. You can check right now while you're still thinking about it. Not by asking yourself whether you have an inner voice. That only gets you the story you already tell about yourself. Instead, catch the next thought as it arrives and look at what it's made of. Words? A picture? A feeling? Or one of those thoughts with no shape at all that you know completely and could not read aloud? And hold it loosely, because this is the honest part. You will be worse at this than you expect. Everyone is. Trained observers, sampling their own minds for days, kept revising what they thought was in there. The researchers arguing about this in journals right now can't settle it either, which means the voice you've assumed was narrating your entire life may have been quieter than you remember, or made of something else altogether, and you'd have had no way of knowing. Tell me what you found. I'm curious which of the 5 you recognized.